Hey, good day, people. Pastor Jamal here. Hey, if you hear some background noise, it's the air conditioning because it's hot. Okay. I was thinking about some things, and I wanted to, and I was reminded of the scripture, and I went back and checked it out. So I wanted to share it with you. This is another God perspective moment for those who need it and don't need a clear understanding of some stuff, which we all do. So here it goes. I'm reading from Isaiah chapter 61. I'm starting at verse 1. I think I'm going to go from 1 to 3, maybe 4. So it says this: the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, for the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted and to proclaim the captives will be released and the prisoners will be freed. He has sent me to tell those who mourn that the time of the Lord's favor has come, and with it, the day of God's anger against their enemies. To all who mourn in Israel, he will give a crown of beauty for ashes, a joy or blessing instead of mourning, festive praise instead of despair. In their righteousness, they will be like great oaks that the Lord has planted for his glory. And 4 just says, they will rebuild the ancient ruins, repairing the cities destroyed long ago. I want to go back to the end of 3, which says, in their righteousness, they will be like great oaks that the Lord has planted for his glory. Beauty for ashes, joy for mourning. Like in their righteousness, they're great oaks. So the Lord is, he's granting them pretty much everything that they need to be granted to stand in and as the vessels and the people that are called by God. So what this reflects is, when we talk about the God perspective, we have to always remember that God always points us to his mind. In order that we receive beauty for ashes and joy for mourning, in order that we stand like great oaks, we have to be considered righteous in God's sight. And again, how do we become righteous in God's sight? Again, righteousness, what is it? It's pretty much, you are righteous because you do things God's way. And we're not talking about doings. We're not talking about physical movings or all that stuff. We're talking about righteousness is always a state of mind. It's always acting out that state of mind. So that's the only doing that's really required of us, is when we are planted in the mind of God, when we allow God's mind to be in us as we are in God, then we, in essence, become these vessels, in this earth that is just so powerful. Sometimes I would think about when it was said Jesus was like, he comes for the broken. And so I was like, well, who's not the broken? As it relates to how we understand Christ and how we understand salvation, it's like there shouldn't, I come for everybody, because everybody's broken or in need of God. But it doesn't say that. It says he comes from the broken. So there are people amongst us, and have always been relics and remnants of God, displaying God's mind. So they're not broken. They're examples. They're pictures of God, right? So, but the mass majority possibly are the ones that have not been able to understand God's mind and walk in God's mind, walk in God's ways. It says that, we're supposed to, the gospel is spreading the good news. Well, what's the good news? Yes, when we talk about Christ has come and salvation is here, how do you think we're saved? How do you think a perpetual salvation, like it's from thousands of years up until now, what does that really look like? It has to be, you're saved because you no longer have to be tied to, shackled to, chained to a perspective that is ungodly, a perspective that is not useful in your transformation. Because we all know what it's like to feel poor and broken and messed up. And we all know what it feels like to, to feel broken and be broken in these kind of ways. So it's so beautiful to understand that God has always been pointing us to salvation is had through God's perspective, through God's mind, through putting on Christ is taking on the mind of God, the ways of God. And it's not rocket science. It's not something that you can't do, because we all have to do it. We are able to do it because God is here. The kingdom of heaven is here. So everything that we need to be those kind of people is already available. Beauty for ashes, joy for mourning. It's available only in the place where God is. And that's God's mind and God's perspective. I'll talk to you. Peace.